military man, huh?
Shut up.
Ah, imaginary friends. We've all had them, but like most, we eventually outgrow them. But what happens when tragedy causes you to keep your imaginary friend around longer than you normally would? What happens when your imaginary friend keeps giving you bad advice? And what happens when fantasy runs into a very real, very frightening reality? Cloak and Dagger... No, not them. Cloak and Dagger was released in July of 1984 as part of a double feature with The Last Starfighter, as both films were released by Universal and feature video games heavily as a plot element. Later that summer, the movie was released on its own. Loosely based on the short story The Window by Cornell Woolrich, Cloak and Dagger presents us with the story of Davy Osborne, played by E.T. star Henry Thomas. Davy is highly imaginative and an avid games enthusiast. Unfortunately, his imagination tends to run away with him and get him into trouble, especially when it pertains to his imaginary friend, dashing super spy Jack Flack, played by, you guessed it, Dabney Coleman. But Davy soon finds his spy fantasies becoming all too real and all too deadly. The film opens somewhere in Russia where various dignitaries are meeting for some sort of shindig. One of the guards hears a plane flying overhead and walks away from his post to investigate. This proves to be a bad idea as he falls foul of Jack Flack himself. Jack enters the embassy where he fends off several assassination attempts, retrieving a briefcase in the process. But he runs into a rather unusual trap on his way out. Yes, it was all part of a role-playing game being played by Davy, his best friend Kim, played by Christina Nigra, and run by game store manager Morris, played by William Forsythe. It's summer in San Antonio, which is why you never see Davy and Kim in school. Oh yes, and for the record, that Cloak and Dagger board game you see in this scene, it's real. And yes, I own a copy. Davy enjoys playing the game, but wants more out of the experience, especially when Morris offers to send them on a secret mission, which doesn't seem all that exciting.
Go over to Textronics and pick me up some catalogs for the new 4200.
Come on, Morris. Give us something exciting, like Cloak and Dagger, only for real.
Morris also asks them to get him a package of Twinkies from the vending machines at the office building Textronics is in, enticing Davy with the promise of a secret message inside. Before they head out, Davy loads a squirt gun with fake blood. Yes, it looks realistic. Yes, this was perfectly legal in the early 80s. Davy and Kim head for the office building, and, still in role-playing mode, Davy refuses to talk to the security guard, who naturally wonders what two kids are doing in the building during business hours. Kim does the actual talking, and they head for the elevators. While waiting, Davy says he'll take the stairs up in case one of us is neutralized. There are also two men waiting for the elevator. This chance meeting is going to start things off because Davy spots that one of them is carrying a gun.
What's the matter now? I had a gun, Kim. It was a real gun.
Oh, Davy, would you stop it?
Honest, I saw a gun.
You're really being a jerk.
As Davy heads up, he stops to contact Kim, but as he signs off, he picks up another signal on the walkie-talkies.
Don't let him leave the building. Bryce, moving. The elevator. The 7th floor.
Hello?
Davy calls Kim back to see if she heard the strange interference, but she tells him to buzz off, which prompts Jack to appear.
So, your friend cut off radio contact, did she?
Oh, hi, Jack.
Well, some people just don't know how to act on a secret mission. I guess we're better off just handling this one on our own.
Now note how we can see Davy reflected in the window across the way, but not Jack, thus confirming that Jack doesn't actually exist. It's a simple effect, but a pretty good one. Davy continues up and reaches the 7th floor. He stops on the landing and happens to see the two men from the elevator reflected in the window, along with a third roughing up another man. The victim rushes out of the room and the two follow, brandishing pistols. Davy hears the silent shots behind him, and the victim appears in the stairwell, having been shot.
Whatever happens, don't let them get it. Tell the FBI 1,329,000. Run! Stop!
The two goons shoot at Davy, but he manages to get back to the lobby and call for help. The security guard heads back into the stairwell with him, but the body of the victim has vanished. Davy tries to explain the situation, but Jack has other advice.
And he was bleeding and he fell. I knew he was dead. Look, I'm not kidding you. I can prove it. He gave me the secret cartridge.
No. Don't trust him, Davy. It's the first rule of espionage. Always stay true to your source.
This will be the beginning of a series of bad decisions Davy makes based on Jack's advice. We then meet the third man from the window, Mr. Rice, a Textronics employee played by Michael Murphy. The security guard asks Rice if he saw anything, which of course he claims he didn't. As the security guards take Davy to talk to the police, we see Rice has Davy's softball, which helpfully has his name written on it. Later that night, Davy and Kim are taken home and we meet Davy's father, Air Force Master Sergeant Hal Osborne, also played by Dabney Coleman. And before the choir pedantic jumps in, yes, I did in fact research this. The rank of Master Sergeant does exist in the Air Force, although typically it's referred to as the rank of E7. Beyond that, there's also the rank of Staff Master Sergeant, which is what I presume Hal is, as he identifies himself as a Staff Sergeant later in the movie. So yes, this is an actual rank in the Air Force. You know, while I've got you here, let me say something right now. This is probably the cheapest DVD release I've ever seen. Okay? This DVD only contains the movie. No bonus features, no commentaries, no trailers, nothing. In fact, this doesn't even have a freaking menu screen. Okay? You hit the menu button, nothing happens. You let the movie play all the way through to the end of the credits, and it just starts over again. Seriously, Universal, what the hell? While Lieutenant Fleming talks to Davy, Jack shows up again for even more bad advice.
Refused to divulge the whereabouts of what he called headquarters.
Sorry, officer, but he does do that. We got him right where we want him. Let him think you're nuts. So if we're gonna be heroes, we've got to keep a low profile.
Hal reveals that Davy's mother recently died, and it's fairly obvious that both Davy and Hal are trying to cope, but this has the side effect of causing the two of them to grow alienated from each other. Davy tries to tell Hal what happened and fires up the Cloak and Dagger cartridge in an effort to find out what's on it and prove he's telling the truth.
What, more Cloak and Dagger? Why don't I just get through telling
Dad, this is important. Just wait a minute, you'll see.
Oh, Davy.
Just give me a chance. A man was just killed for this.
Yes, much like the board game, the Cloak and Dagger video game was real. The game, originally called Agent X, was under development by Atari while the movie was in pre-production. Both the production team and Atari found out they were working on projects along the same lines, and a deal was struck to include footage from the game in the movie. In return, Atari renamed the game Cloak and Dagger and the player character as Jack Flack. As an inside joke, back in the stairwell scene, Jack mentions he used to be known as Agent X.
Like the Maracaibo assignment, remember that? Back when I was known as Agent X.
The footage used is actually from the arcade version of the game, which was a limited release using the controls and cabinets of Robotron 2084 machines. An actual version of the game for the Atari 5200 was planned, but was ultimately abandoned when the video game crash of 1983 hit Atari hard. Davy plays the game for a bit, but is unable to unlock the information. Hal gets frustrated and shuts the game off and takes several of Davy's other games with him, trying to force his son to live in the real world.
Davy, when I was a kid, I was exactly like you are. I wanted to be a hero. That's why I joined the Air Force, so I could be somebody. Let me tell you something, Davy. Heroes don't just shoot bad guys. They put supper on the table. They fix bicycles. They do boring things, real things, not make-believe. I think you'll understand it when you get a little bit older.
The phone rings, and it's an unpleasant surprise for Davy.
Hello?
Is this David G. Osborne?
Yes?
Yeah.
It's them! It's the spies! The ones who killed the man! Hurry!
Hello. I hung up.
The next day, Hal goes to work, much to Davy's dismay, as he's sure Rice and his goons are waiting for him to be alone so they can try to get the cartridge back. Davy tries to get Kim to come over, but like everyone else, she's convinced this is another of Davy's fantasies. As Davy tries to figure out what to do with the cartridge, Rice's goons show up. Davy manages to escape the house and get to the mall where he gives the cartridge to Morris, trying to figure out what's going on. Morris also thinks this is another of Davy's games, but he humors Davy and opens up the cartridge.
This microchip doesn't belong here.
What?
Take a look. Whoever put this in really knew what he was doing. Look at those connections. Could be used to store information. Input, output.
Kind of information? Government plans, maybe?
Could be anything, really.
As Morris starts playing the game, Kim calls Davy and says she's at Davy's house. Of course, Rice and his goons take her hostage.
Kim?
Seems we each have something the other wants, don't we, kid?
Yeah.
We might consider a trade. How's that sound?
Just leave her alone. She doesn't know anything.
She does now. Do you know the Japanese sunken gardens?
Yeah.
Good. We'll meet you there at noon. If you tell anybody about this, we'll break your little friend in half.
Jack's bad advice continues when he suggests Davy swipe another Cloak and Dagger cartridge to give to Rice in exchange for Kim. They meet at the Japanese sunken gardens, and Rice reveals he's supposed to hand the cartridge off to someone else at 5:30 that afternoon. Davy gets Rice to let Kim go, and Rice tries to grab him, but Davy manages to hold Rice at bay with his squirt gun. He lets Rice have it, and he and Kim run off. Rice finds a sticker from the game store in the back of the cartridge and realizes it's the wrong one and sends his goons after them. Kim and Davy manage to hop a bus, with the goons following in a van. Rice calls his goons, saying he's going for the real cartridge, the sticker having clued him in on where Davy could have hidden it. Davy tells Kim to head for Morris's store and tell him what's happening, while he gets off the bus to act as a decoy, still thinking Rice doesn't know where the cartridge is. Meanwhile, Morris manages to finally crack the encoding and find out what's been added to the tape.
The following material is for security clearance personnel only. It is a federal crime to use such material without proper authorization.
Unfortunately, this will be the last thing he ever does.
Said I'd be right there.
Thanks to some actually helpful advice from Jack for once, Davy tries to lose the two goons on a river tour boat, and it looks like he's about to succeed, except when a couple realizes one of their wallets are missing. Davy moves from seat to seat trying to elude the goons. Ultimately, he winds up sitting between an elderly couple, Eunice and George, played by Jeanette Nolan and John McIntyre. They notice one of Rice's goons following Davy around the boat and are inclined to believe that he's in danger. As they try to figure out what to do, the other goon shouts fire, causing a panic. The first goon tries to stab Davy, but he manages to get off the boat and make a break for it. The goons aren't able to get off after Davy gets away, thanks to the other angry passengers. Davy manages to get back to the game store, but only finds Kim in the back room, along with a nasty surprise.
Where's Morris?
I don't know, but look. Davy, do you think they...
No, Morris is too smart for them. We'll find him.
I think he's already dead.
Shut up! You don't know that.
Davy tells Kim to call her mom and get her to call the police about Rice and the cartridge and that Rice is going to hand it off at 5:30. Davy himself, convinced his dad won't believe him, says he's going to go find Rice and try to stop him. He goes back to the office building into the parking garage where he manages to find Rice's car and pops the trunk. He also finds Morris's body in it. Rice comes out of the elevator and Jack helps Davy hide in the trunk. Eventually, Rice stops and Davy listens in on the conversation with the goons.
Who gets the game? I don't know, and I don't want to know. We just leave the case, we wait a few minutes, take the money. One thing I know about these people is one of them is missing a couple fingers from his right hand.
Rice and one of his goons head into the Alamo while the other goon waits in the car. Davy gets out and heads into the Alamo where the drop is happening. While he tries to keep an eye on Rice, to his surprise, he runs into George and Eunice again. As the Alamo closes, Rice drops the case with the cartridge and Davy tries to make a break with it, but is caught by security. George and Eunice step in to assist.
Steal anything, officer? Well, he took this. Well, it's just a simple mistake. I sent the boy in to pick up my camera case, and he took the wrong one. Hey. This yours? We'll come and get it.
Eunice takes Davy to their car while George talks to Rice and the security guard. George hands the case back to Rice, much to Davy's dismay. However, it turns out George pulled a switch of his own and got the case with the cartridge. Davy explains the situation and gets an unpleasant surprise.
May I see the tape, Davy?
Sure. Something wrong, Davy?
George and Eunice mention they're heading for Mexico City at midnight that night and express their displeasure at how everything has gone so far before knocking Davy out. He comes to later back in the trunk of Rice's car. When the goons check on him, Davy feigns still being asleep. The goons decide to wait to kill him until they get to the desert, where they plan to dump both Davy and Morris. They also decide that a little extra is in order for killing Davy, and they head up to have a few words with Rice, leaving the keys in the ignition. Davy and Jack manage to push the back seat forward and get into the passenger compartment, resetting the seat when they get up. Davy finds the car phone and tries to call Kim, who reports that her mom isn't home yet. Davy tells her to get to the airport and find George and Eunice before they manage to catch their plane. He's forced to hang up when Rice and the goons return. And he finds out that he's not the only one with a target on his head.
What's that?
Garage door opener.
What are you gonna do, crush her with a garage door? Not quite. This is a trigger for a clock. It's gonna set off enough plastique to blow up her and half her neighborhood. So now, in exactly 1 hour, our little friend's gonna have a very short, very loud nightmare.
It'll be midnight.
Rice and his goons discover Davy's gone, prompting Davy to steal Rice's car and cause a lot of damage in the process. Eventually, he crashes the car in such a way as to immobilize it. Davy tries to call Kim, but she's already left for the airport. Davy tries to raise her on the walkie-talkie, but when Kim doesn't respond, he realizes Rice has planted the bomb in the walkie-talkie casing. Rice finds the car, and Davy and Jack take off. The second goon hands Rice a case from the van, and the three keep searching. Davy manages to find a phone booth and call his dad. We also see that Davy appears to be getting exasperated with Jack's excitement over what's happening.
Trying to kill us.
They can't kill me. They can't see me.
They can kill me.
Not if you're good enough. That's what this game is all about, right? Right?
Davy manages to get his dad on the line, but is cut off when the goon in the van spots him and tries to run him down. Davy gets out before the van totals the booth. Fortunately for Davy, this causes the goon to lose control and crash into a nearby store before being thrown out through the windshield and killed. This naturally makes Hal concerned, and he goes off to find his son. At the store, we see that it's 11:20, and Jack tells Davy to get the goon's gun. Davy refuses and heads out to catch the bus, not realizing that he's lost his backpack, which has his bus pass in it.
Come on, get with it. You know, win this game, you gotta take advantage of breaks like this. Get the gun.
We gotta get across town and get a bus to the airport.
Davy.
Along the river, it's the fastest way.
Play right.
Now, for the remainder of the film, you'll have to assume that a lot of the scenes we see from this point on more or less happen simultaneously, as it's the only way the timeline can actually work. Davy winds up back at the river with Rice and his remaining goon right behind. Rice opens the case, pulling out an assault rifle. Davy stumbles and hurts his knee under one of the bridges, but it appears everything is getting to him, and it's starting to strain his relationship with Jack.
You can't just go right for the objective. That's no fun.
Fun? We've only got 24 minutes before the bomb goes off.
That's why you have to take them out.
Yeah, but I don't have a gun or a knife or anything.
The crossfire gambit. Remember the crossfire gambit.
Davy follows Jack's advice and tricks Rice into shooting the remaining goon. Realizing he just caused someone to die, Davy gets a hard dose of reality and his fantasy world starts to break down. But Jack manages to get Davy to pick up the goon's gun, which leads him to his final confrontation with Rice. And Rice has apparently finally had it with Davy.
You know what I'm gonna do to you, boy? I'm gonna blow both your kneecaps off. It won't kill you, but it'll hurt worse than any dying you can imagine. Then you know what I'm gonna do to you? Huh?
Shoot him, Davy. Shoot him.
I'm gonna shoot you in the stomach. And then when you beg for me to finish the job, I won't do it. I'm just gonna watch you die. Slowly.
Shoot. Pull the trigger.
Between Rice's threats and Jack's prodding, Davy freezes, which prompts Jack to take action. Davy's reaction to Jack's recklessness caused Rice to fire into the shadows, supposedly hitting Jack, which prompts Davy to fire, killing Rice. However, having actually killed someone and realizing Jack tricked him into killing Rice since Jack knew Rice couldn't actually see him, causes Davy to say the one thing no imaginary friend wants to hear.
I don't want to play anymore.
I see. Why do you kids always say that?
Huh?
My father said the same thing. And after all those games of cowboys and Indians, get tired of make-believe and break your toys. Damn.
And because Davy has pretty much started to grow up, that means it's time for Jack to go.
Never did like that rule. Leaving when they stop believing. You want to know something? You're the best playmate I ever had.
Jack asks Davy to get him a cigarette so he doesn't have to see him disappear. When Davy turns back, Jack has vanished for the final time. But he still has a few last words of encouragement when Davy says he can't do this on his own.
Come back, I can't do it on my own.
Yes, you can. You were always on your own. Save Kim, Davy.
Kim arrives at the airport with 15 minutes until the bomb goes off. Again, with a lot of these airport scenes, remember, this was pre-9/11 and it was possible for a lot of these things to happen back then, like an 8-year-old girl wandering into a busy airport in the middle of the night and it not raising an eyebrow. Meanwhile, most likely around the time Davy was being chased down the river by Rice and his goon, Hal arrives at Kim's house and meets her mother, who shows him a note Kim left indicating where she went. Hal calls Lieutenant Fleming, only to find Fleming is trying to reach him because Rice and his goons' bodies have been discovered, and there were apparently witnesses who say they were shooting at a kid Davy's age. Speaking of Davy, he tries to catch the bus to the airport, but with no pass or fare, he's thrown off. Fortunately, Davy manages to get a cab driver to take him to the airport. Kim reports what Davy told her to a security officer, and he takes her to see his supervisor. At the same time, George and Eunice arrive and begin heading through security. Davy gets to the airport and has Kim paged, but when he sees the flight to Mexico City is boarding, he heads for security and spots Eunice and George. Desperate, he claims they're his parents, which delays them long enough for Kim to come out of the security office. Davy manages to get the walkie-talkie from her, but this also gives George an opportunity to get the security officer's gun. They take Davy hostage and drag him out to the plane. Hal, Kim's mom, and the police all arrive, and Fleming informs them what's going on.
They were wanted by the FBI for selling military secrets which were smuggled in children's video cartridges.
What about my son?
We've got divers down there now. Did this belong to him?
What's going on?
George and Eunice demand a pilot be on the plane to fly them to Cuba in the next 5 minutes or they kill Davy. This is a moot point, of course, since the bomb will go off by then. Hal, having a license to taxi airplanes but not fly them, impersonates a pilot and heads out to the plane. Counting on George and Eunice to not know much about the actual instruments on a plane, he uses the PA system, pretending it's a radio in an effort to reassure Davy that everything's under control. When Davy doesn't respond, Hal comes up with another way to get his attention.
This is Captain Jack Black. David Osborne, get up to the cockpit right away.
What's the big idea? You don't have to see the kid.
They told me to make sure the boy was all right.
Eunice sends Davy up to the cockpit and discovers the bomb. She yells for George, who intercepts Davy. Hal gets the plane moving, and George and Eunice try to disarm the bomb. They fail. Up in the cockpit, Hal locks the door, and because the cabin's pressurized, George and Eunice can't get out the main access door. Hal opens the window in the cockpit and helps Davy escape the plane. Davy barely manages to roll out of the way of the wheels and tries to catch up to it. And then, the bomb goes off. Implausible? Maybe, but despite a line to the contrary Davy said in the cockpit, from the looks of things, Hal could have easily gotten out of the cockpit right behind him, just before the bomb went off. Admittedly, he's most likely to have some more severe injuries, but hey, 80s kids movie. And yes, this is a kids movie. Okay, more accurately, a family movie. Cloak and Dagger works on 2 levels. If you see this movie as a kid, you get caught up in the adventure and excitement as Davy outwits some truly dangerous people, aided by the suave and somewhat smarmy charm of Jack Black. As an adult, you do realize that Davy is having emotional problems and Jack is the manifestation of those problems, offering advice which ultimately proves to be detrimental. And the entire situation forces Davy to grow up fast and realize that real-life espionage isn't cool and glamorous, it's dirty and nasty. Henry Thomas has major chops in this movie, portraying Davy in a way that makes it clear that, yeah, Davy is an actual kid, and is really largely surviving due to pure dumb luck, and a few of his spy fantasy strategies actually working. Christina Nigra is a perfect foil for Thomas, portraying Kim as more down-to-earth and level-headed than Davy, but willing to go all in when she realizes Davy's telling the truth. Michael Murphy is chilling as Rice. In fact, Rice may be the most evil villain I've ever seen in a movie like this. Rice is quite clearly a psychopath, as evidenced by his desire to make Davy die slowly and horribly, and to take out an 8-year-old girl with a bomb just because she knows who he is. And as for Dabney Coleman, this movie lets us see all sides of his talent in the dual roles of Jack Black and Hal Osborne. As Hal, we see the down-to-earth, no-nonsense side of his performance with the genuine emotion that bubbles underneath the surface. Coleman plays Hal authentically as a recent widower trying to figure out how to put his life back together and reconnect with his son who seems to be pulling away from him. This is a major contrast to the brash and impulsive Jack Flack, who lives for nothing but the various games of make-believe he plays with Davy. You get the impression that Jack does like Davy and has what he thinks are his best interests at heart, but further reflection will find that Jack's advice does as much to hinder Davy as it helps him. But this is paid off in Jack's final moments, a haunting scene that literally shows the death of Davy's childhood innocence as he fades away. However, in terms of box office, Cloak and Dagger, while not a flop, was a disappointment, only earning just over $9 million against a $13 million budget. But with the rise of the home video market, it did bring an entire generation of kids a little action and adventure, and along with 2 other major films at the time, introduced them to one of the greatest actors of the 80s and beyond. I'm Aaron Mills. Join me again next week for another edition of Saturd80s.
This is starting to get good.
What?
Just like Cloak and Dagger.